All righty. All right, folks, I've got 11 o'clock straight up. My name is Ron Gacious. I'm chair of the City of Lawrence Affordable Housing Advisory Board. I'd like to call to order our January 2021 meeting. First order of business before public comment is to ask if we have any staff that are going to review for us our rules for discussion, decision-making, and communicating over Zoom today.
Chair, this is Dani Walters. I can do that.
Thank you, Dani.
Would you like me to do that now?
I think you're up. Yeah, we'll do that
All
before
right.
public comment.
Sounds good. Pull it back up here. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to provide a few procedural reminders for the virtual meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and also public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, when you are not participating, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found in the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting will make it easier for everyone to hear. You'll just need to remember to unmute if and when you want to speak, and in some cases, I may mute or unmute people as needed to minimize distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name every time you speak for the benefit of those listening remotely. You can turn on your video camera, or you can turn your video camera on or off by clicking the video icon in the menu. For the purposes of this public meeting, when you are participating in the meeting, please keep your video on. When you are not participating in the meeting, it is okay to turn your video off. You'll still be able to listen to the meeting when your video is turned off. You'll just have to remember to turn your video back on when you are participating. Turning your video off when you are not participating will help make sure that the active meeting participants can be seen on the screen. In some cases, we may turn someone's video off if they are not actively participating to avoid distraction during the meeting. You can always turn your video back on during the meeting. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen, you will see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker, and gallery view will show all the meeting participants. Board members and city staff members, you must state your name and title each time you speak. All motions need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, the chair will call on the board members individually to provide a vote. Mr. Chair, you will then need to announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. When public comment is sought on an item, individuals participating via Zoom shall use the raise your hand feature. Windows and Mac users can access this feature through the participants button at the bottom of the screen. Android and iPhone users can access this feature through the more button located at the bottom right-hand corner of their screen. For those calling in by phone, you may dial *9. Individuals will be called upon by name in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. When you are called on, please unmute your listening device and state your name before speaking. The chair will then call for in-person public comment for those without access to technology options. Staff present will direct the speakers to the podium following social distancing and safety protocols. The regular 3-minute time will apply. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors. I have a request. We have 5 participants from the City Hall, and my request would be that they identify themselves. You can go into the Zoom window and rename, but we have 5 participants who are listed as 6 East 6th, and my request would be that that they are identified.
I think that's an excellent idea. Dani, can we do that? Can we ask folks to identify themselves?
They're actually all the audio visual folks here. It's actually just all Kurt, so.
Okay. Thomas, is that sufficient?
Everyone who's logged in at City Hall is in this room, which is 2 of us.
I suppose so. I mean, it just strikes me as, yes, that'll be fine.
The word that comes to mind is untidy. Okay, are there any other questions or comments for Dani? Dani, I have one for you. I may have a copy of an agenda that's one or two versions old. So if something's changed in the agenda order and I start to roll over it inappropriately, just stop me and point me to the right spot. What I've got next is public comment. Do we have any public comment that's been written, that's been submitted in writing, or do we have any public comment from members of the public that are participating in the call?
Mr. Chair, this is Brad Carr, Community Development Analyst. We will need you to take roll of the members so that we can
yes.
determine that we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Brad. And I just pulled up my list to do that and then set it down. Thank you very much. We'll start with a roll call. In the order they appear on this list: Erica Zimmerman.
Present.
Dana Ortiz.
Present.
Shannon Oury.
Present.
Edith Guffey.
Present.
Thomas Howe.
Present.
Monte Soukup.
Present.
Paul Nuzum.
Here.
Patrick Kelly.
Present.
Rebecca Buford. Rebecca out. Sarah Waters.
Present.
And Christina Gentry. Do we have Christina on board? Okay. I don't see anywhere on our school here that might be Christina, so we'll mark her absent here. And Cole Brown. And myself, Ron Gacious, present. Did we have someone just join us?
No, this is Dani Walters. I was just going to say Cole is normally here in attendance and he is not here this morning. So.
And he missed the December meeting also. Has anyone had any contact with him, city staff, since the December meeting?
Mr. Chair, this is Brad Carr, Community Development Analyst. I have spoken with Cole on the phone and explained to him that in order to participate in today's voting, he would need to go back and watch the video of the December meetings and fill out and turn in a score sheet. He indicated to me that he would do that, but I have not heard from him since. He did not turn in his score sheets. And obviously he's not here yet today. Diane, I believe we're going to have a discussion about without Christina here, we do not have a quorum to do the funding recommendations.
I think we have a quorum to actually bring the meeting to order, to open the meeting. What's the city requirements, Brad, for how many we need to have in attendance and participating in the decision making?
This is Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think I can weigh in on that.
Sure, Diane.
So as long as we have a quorum at the beginning and the end of the meeting, if we go below the quorum number to handle a specific item due to conflicts, that is okay, as I understand it from our city attorney's office. But it would mean that we would need to have somebody who may otherwise be bowing out to be present at the end of the meeting, in which case, if you're able to do that, I can contact you and let you know so that we can get you back on if that's possible.
I have a question. Would that person be allowed to monitor the meeting over the public portal as any other constituent would be?
Yes, there's not a problem with that, Diane Stoddard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so with myself, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of our, I have 11 of our 13 in attendance. So we have a quorum to open our meeting today. Thank you.
So Ron, this is Shannon.
Yes, ma'am.
I intend to listen to the whole meeting, so I'll be here if you need me to come back on.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll be here as well, Ron. This is Patrick Kelly. I'll be here as well.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Excellent. Diane, anything else we need to discuss prior to public comment?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I do not believe so, unless Brett or Dani have anything additional I'm not thinking of.
Okay, thank you. Ron Gacious, AHAB Chair, will ask for public comment. Do we have anyone on the Zoom call that has identified themselves for public comment? Brad, anyone that you know of?
This is Brad Carr, Community Development Analyst. I do not see anybody on the Zoom call with their hand raised. We did have one piece of written public comment, but it was for a specific agenda item, item C4, and so it's been added to the agenda under that item.
Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is to approve the minutes of our December meeting. Chair would entertain a motion to approve.
Chair, this is Monte, Soukup, board member representing Justice Matters. I move to approve the December 14 minutes as written.
Mr. Chair, Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors. I would second that motion.
Was that a second, Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the December 14th, 2020 meeting. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye when I call your name. Erica?
Aye.
Dana?
Aye.
Shannon?
Aye.
Edith?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
Monte?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And Ron, myself, aye. Thank you. Minutes are approved 11-0. Next agenda item is to receive the monthly financial report.
Good morning, board. This is Danielle Bush-Cutter, Budget and Strategic Initiatives Administrator. I will briefly go over the budget report. Oh, and I cannot share my screen, so I will just verbally go through it. So we did, I wanted to kind of go over 2020 at a high level since we don't yet have revenues for 2021, because as you remember, with sales tax, we're always a couple months behind. So at the end of 2020, on the revenue side, we came in about $20,000 above our initial budgeted revenues for 2020. Our sales tax did come in lower than we initially budgeted for. However, the interest income was higher than what we initially anticipated. So that interest income made up that loss that we saw for the sales tax side of things. So overall, in this fund, we did hit those budget targets. So that's really good news. And then on the expenditure side, obviously those all are very planned as you all make recommendations like you are going to later today. So those are right in line with what we anticipated. So I would be happy to answer any questions that you all may have for 2020. And we will slowly, as those sales tax revenues start to come in, start moving in this report into 2021 revenues. So I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Danielle. Any questions for Danielle? Thank you very much. Ron Gacious, AHAB Chair. We're now moving on to the next agenda item, which is to elect Board Chair and Vice Chair for 2021. And before opening the floor for nominations, I'd like to say that it's been my really great pleasure to serve as your chair the last 2 years. What I hoped to do was always have a point of view on the important issues, ensure that everyone had an opportunity to speak, try to facilitate the board building strong consensus around its decisions, and then always publicly and privately supporting those decisions. I don't think those are remarkable charges that I tried to take on. I would expect that of any of you. And I hope that the next chair will, kind of create their own expectations for themselves and goals for what they want to get done over the course of the year. I tried to do that, and we've made some progress, but the last year has also just kicked us in the shins really hard, and I think stymied what could have been a year productive in another way. I suspect 2021 will have its own challenges, and I look forward to working collaboratively with all of you and addressing those. So it's been a real pleasure, and thank you very much. The floor is open for nominations for board chairman, chairwoman, chairperson. Not seeing any. I have one, and my nomination for board chair is Monte Soukup. Do we have a second?
Shannon Allery, Housing Authority, I second that.
Thank you, Shannon. Do we have Ron Gacious, AHAB chair? Do we have any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll move to the question. All those in favor of Monte Soukup as chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board 2021, please respond by saying aye as I call your name. Erica?
Aye.
Dana?
Aye.
Shannon?
Aye.
Edith?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
Monte? You don't get off on this one, you're on mute.
It might be a conflict of interest, but aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And myself, Ron Gacious, aye. Monte, congratulations. You are our new chair by
Mr.
vote-
Chair, this is Sarah Waters at the University of Kansas. I think Monte may need to, however, explain what he just stated before that vote is certified, because he stated he thought he might have a conflict of interest. So I know we all just voted, but Monte didn't actually accept the nomination, although he voted for himself. So just trying to understand a little more context.
Just in the sense that we have, whenever somebody has been involved in a decision that involves them, they have had to abstain or leave the meeting. So that was all I meant by that. I don't have a conflict outside of that would keep me from accepting a nomination.
Monte, my understanding was that you felt your conflict of interest was in voting for yourself, nothing other than that.
Correct.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. And now I think you can certify it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Ron Gacious, former AHAB chair. Vote has been certified 11-0.
Mr. Chair,
Monte, you are now the chair, so I turn it over to you, sir.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Former Chair, I don't know who to address this to.
Yes, Edith.
I don't know when the appropriate time to say this is, but I'd like to say a word of thanks to you, Ron, for your leadership. I started as new, and you were very welcoming and very gracious as I began to learn the ropes here. I wanted to say a word of thank you for that and for your leadership during some very difficult times, as you have noted. And I just want to take a moment to express words of appreciation for the leadership that you have shown on this board.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Edith. I I would mirror those comments. Ron's done a great job. We've had certainly a difficult year, and we have learned a lot this last year. And Ron, you've done a great job of leading us through that. So thank you for your service to this board. Does anyone else have any comments regarding that? Yes, Dana.
I also just want to echo that. Thank you, Ron, for going above and beyond, especially through this year. And you always manage to do enough of your research and make calls and figure out what the issues were. And I greatly appreciate that rigor. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, moving on, we will go to item 3 on the agenda, quick updates. Is there a staff report on that, or what are we doing here?
Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, Ron Gacious, Chamber of Commerce representative, I think you need to select a vice chair.
Oh, okay. Okay. I guess at this time we would be looking for nominations for a vice chair for the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. Do I have any nominations?
Mr. Chairman, Ron Gacious, Chamber of Commerce representative. I've grown to greatly appreciate her attention to detail, so I'd like to nominate Sarah Waters as the vice chair.
Okay, we have one nomination for vice chair. Are there other nominations from the floor for a vice chair position?
Mr. Chair, I decline that nomination. This is Sarah Waters. Based on my schedule, I'm sorry. I'm typically at meetings, but I am unpredictable, and I know it's just vice chair, but.
Okay.
To Chair, Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors representative. If Edith Guffey would be open to doing it, I would nominate Edith as vice chair.
Edith, I think the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, I second that nomination.
Edith, I'm going to give you the opportunity to breathe a little bit and decide whether you want to take that, accept the nomination or not. So take your time.
Well, since Monte is almost always here, Monte, will you be here like all the time?
Edith, I plan to be here all the time. Yes.
Okay, if you promise it, you promise that nothing will happen to you.
And I don't think I'll be involved with any project submittals, so I won't have to recuse myself for projects. So
Famous last words.
so go ahead.
If elected, I will serve.
Okay, so we have a nomination and a second. Are there any other nominations from the floor? I want to close that before we move on. Okay, this is Monte Soukup, chair. Hearing no further nominations, I'm going to call for the roll call vote. I'm going to have to find a roll to call here in just a second. I'm going to go down to participants here. Okay, this is probably going to be in a different order. Please respond aye. Dana Ortiz.
Aye.
Shannon Ori.
Aye.
Edith Guffey.
Aye.
Hold on, my thing is moving around on me. Erica Zimmerman.
Aye.
Sarah Waters.
Aye.
Shannon Ori.
I already voted, so I won't vote
Gosh,
twice.
things moving around on me. Okay. Patrick Kelly.
Aye.
Thomas Howe.
Aye.
I believe that's everyone. Did I miss anyone? Myself. Aye.
Paul Newsome, aye.
Oh, Paul Newsom. Okay. Aye.
Ron Gaseous, aye.
Ron Gages. Okay. I will get this. I'll get better at this. I promise. I believe that is 11-0 vote. Edith, congratulations. You're the vice chair. Okay. I believe now we are ready for the quick update on applying an equitable framework for housing policy response during COVID-19 and beyond. Is there a staff report regarding that?
Mr. Chair, Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. Just really quickly, this was just a webinar that we had come across from the Urban League and thought it may be of interest. So just passing it along to you. It was a recorded session, so sometimes those are nice if you can catch a recording at your leisure.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate the staff staying on top of those kind of things that can broaden our knowledge base. Did anybody have any comment on that video? Ron?
Ron Gaseous, Chamber of Commerce representative. If you don't have time to watch the whole video, it's over an hour. So it's, not everyone's got that much time. But if you don't have time to watch the video, print or go to the abstract. Go to the link that takes you to the document and look at the abstract. It's only a page and a half. Great short summary, and the 4 principles that they lay out for an equitable framework for housing policy solutions for COVID and beyond. I thought they were excellent. They link up pretty well with the way we've thought about our work, but they also identify some issues. They include some components of the equitable framework that we don't probably have in our strategic plan. So I really encourage everyone to take a look at it. And I'd like at some time in the future us to discuss some of these principles a bit as we continue our work. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that tip on that. Is there any further discussion on that subject? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4. It's our NOFA funding recommendations. I believe that the first item of business there really is the public comment. So I'm going to open the floor for public comment at this point, if we have any. Danielle or Brad, has anybody submitted a request to comment?
Brad Carr, Community Development Analyst. I've attached a link on the agenda to the only written public comment that we received. And on the Zoom meeting, I don't see anybody indicating, raising their hand that they'd like to give public comment on this item.
Okay. Has everybody read the written comment, or should we read that into the record, you feel? Anyone? I've read it. Okay. Yeah, Shannon.
I also read it.
Mhm. Okay, well, I think we should probably take a look at the compiled scoring matrix then at this point. Daniel, Dana, you have a question?
Those of us who probably need to recuse ourselves at that point.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I guess if you have a proposal, then at this point you need to recuse yourself. And that, from what I can see, is Shannon, Erica, and Dana. Is that correct? And Patrick. Okay. So when we see you're gone, we'll continue on. Okay. All right then. Danielle, can we get the scoring matrix up so people can see on screen share?
Yeah, I would ask Brad real quick if he has it easily accessible. If not, I can pull it up on the computer here.
We don't necessarily have to have it up, but people have it in front of them. I would just make a little bit one opening comment about that. I think maybe other people have the same thought too, but I struggle a little bit with the scoring matrix. But the one thing that I did note after we got the compilation back is that regardless of how you scored or how you put your rankings in, almost everybody ranked, the top 2 or 3 projects as the top 2 or 3 projects. So that was, regardless of whether you ranked it at 25 or at 12, the ranking of 1, 2, 3 of the projects was very, very consistent. So I thought that was nice to see. The project that had the highest ratings was the Tennis to Homeowners Vecino project. And I think that was ranked the highest by everyone. So I guess at this point, I would open it up to discussion on how we want to move forward with recommendations. If someone has an idea for a recommendation or comments. So I'd open the floor up to that. Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Ron Gacious, Chamber of Commerce representative. I have a lot of heart for almost all of these projects. My thought is almost all of them reflect good investment opportunities for the trust fund. I'm aware that we, have maybe 25 or 30% of the funding of what's been requested. We could spend 2.5, 3 times as much as we have available. A couple of these projects ask for virtually everything we have available. As you noted, most of us had the Libertad project on the west side of town ranked as our highest or perhaps the second highest. What my understanding is in following up with that project is that they don't need cash in hand for their project till near the end of this calendar year. But they need a firm commitment for the financial contribution to be made no later than when they submit their final application with the state of Kansas for the tax credits, which is sometime like the first week of May. So what I would like to see us do is make a commitment, recommend to the city commission that we make a financial commitment in support of the Libertad project, but either make that commitment in such a way that the city commission is committing general fund dollars, understanding that when they need to write the check for the general fund dollars in November, the trust fund by then will have another $450,000 and can fund that project. So instead of authorizing, recommending the expenditure of only the dollars we have available right now, I'd like to see us spend the dollars that we have right now on some of these other projects, but also ask the city commission for a firm commitment of financial support for the Libertad project, not to be counted against what we've got available to spend right now, but with the understanding that when the check needs to be written, there'll be additional funds in the trust fund that could be drawn down for that purpose. And then we can continue the discussion. If people like that concept, then we can continue the discussion about how to spend the dollars on everything that ranks number 2 through 8.
Thank you, Ron. Thomas?
Mr. Chair, Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors. Ron, while I I'd like to address the that proposal as put forward by our Chamber of Commerce representative. While I understand and appreciate what you're trying to do there, it gives me a little bit of heartburn for two reasons. First of all, and I want to be blunt here, things could go to hell in a handbasket pretty quickly, and we have no more money, and this doesn't happen. And so what you're asking is to commit our commission to something which, and I will grant it is an extremely small possibility, but that we may not be able to fulfill. Secondly, it feels to me a little bit like doing that depletes or deprives future projects from the funds which would be allocated to them down the road. And so I understand what the point is there, is to be able to distribute our funds as equitably as possible. But I'm looking at the numbers on the average, and Libertad was pretty substantially above everything else. It gives me a little heartburn.
Is this Monte Soukup chair? Does anyone else want to weigh in on this?
Mr. Chair, this is Sarah Waters, University of Kansas. I agree with Thomas Howe. I feel like in most of our previous discussions, at times we've put forward some similar pieces. We've used them in the past, but it causes me concern to try to delay that money over at least all the money. So I don't know if there's a middle ground with that. Because also what I was hearing is it was likely take away much of our November NOFA, potentially, or next year's NOFA, if we dedicated a lot of those funds now. And there may be other people out there that were planning to request at that time frame. So I would prefer not to take the approach completely, but maybe hybridize if there's a way to do it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Ron Gase's chamber representative. I'd like to respond to a couple of comments. I think they're good comments. They're the right issues that we should be thinking about. The way I would like to make a recommendation to the City Commission is that I understand that we should not be making and cannot make commitments of funds that aren't yet received. So what I'd like the City Commission to do is authorize a letter in support of the project for part of the project packet that goes into the state in May, which is the same thing we did for the Tony Kresnick project before. But have them make the commitment, the financial commitment of their own funds, of general obligation funds of the city. By the time we get to November and we're doing, if the only other notice of funding availability we do this calendar year is in November, we will have accumulated about 10 months worth of revenue, 9 months worth of revenue when the application notice goes out. And we will have received, I believe, the $350,000 earmark that we received from the CIP. And so we would have maybe something over $1 million available. I don't think my recommendation, it would deplete, if the city were to decide in November, well, we're going to take the funds out of the trust fund instead of the general obligation funds, then yes, in fact, we would be pulling down our funds. But we've got so many legitimate affordable housing projects in front of us. I could easily argue before the City Commission that it'd be a great investment of city dollars above and beyond what the trust fund funds to fund the Libertad project. I think many of us are prepared to make the recommendation that it be funded now. I am. If the option is not to do this, well, then I want to spend $450,000 in favor of the Libertad project. It came out number one on virtually everybody's score sheet. But that means none of the other programs get a chance at any funds under our current scheme until next year, a full 11 months from now before we have another scheduled NOFA. Now, at the December meeting, I suggested that we not do that. At the December meeting, I suggested maybe we look at doing something every 6 months so that we could get our resources out into the community sooner. And that's what I'm, you know, that's another component part of what I hope we would consider today.
Ron, this is Monte Soukup, Chair. I certainly appreciate your thought process on it, and I have gone through the same exercise in my mind. I came up with a slightly different solution, which might actually be some of what Sarah's talking about as a compromise of asking the staff potentially how much would they, if we had to commit to LiberTad, if we want to commit to LiberTad, how much funding would the staff be comfortable saying was easily be available at the time we need to fund LiberTad to be able to fund some of these other projects? Because I agree there are some really great projects on there and some really great needs. And then the second swing I took at that was it's a great opportunity to ask maybe the city to permanently fund or find other funding sources for some of the projects that we have struggled with, particularly some of the voucher projects and those things. You know, is there another funding source outside what the voters voted for to, you know, to help with this issue that are going to be annual asks? Because we're starting to see, you know, annual asks for some of these projects. So should they be funded out of a permanent source? Will we be doing ourselves a service to find them a permanent source? Because this source evaporates, you know, in year 10. So maybe this is a good opportunity to recommend, you know, whatever projects we want to recommend to be funded out of the trust fund, but then also push the city commission towards finding permanent funding for a couple of these projects that really aren't that expensive to operate. We're talking about $50,000 for Horizons, or, you know, $50,000 for one of the several, you know, keep people in their existing homes kind of projects. So I guess I would like to hear people's thoughts on that as well. I think we need to find a permanent funding source for some of these things that are annual asks, essentially every year.
This is Edith Guffey, member at large. And we are once again up against what I've been pressing for every time we get to this point. This time it is really obvious. This Libertad Lawrence is everything we have asked for. It's on the west side. It's permanently affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And I think we all know that. And it is pressing up against really good projects that come every time we have a funding issue, every time we have a funding request. And that is going to continue. And so, Mr. Chair, I agree with you. It is time to ask the city to say there needs to be another resource, another kind of response to these continuing funding needs for the shelter, for vouchers. Otherwise, we are going to continue to have this question, this competition between permanently affordable housing and these continuing funding needs of organizations and agencies, which are definitely valid and need to happen, but perhaps not this way. So I support your recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, Ron Gaseous, Chamber Representative. I completely support that approach also. What's become clear over this past 12 months is that the trust fund, the housing trust fund, is not well equipped to respond to crisis issues. It's not a pool of money that flexes very well. In fact, we're locked into funding streams that largely are outside our control. And when the economy goes south, so does our funding stream. At the time of greatest need for support services, our revenues for the trust fund start to decline. So it's just not an appropriate home for some of what we're asked to fund. I do think that there are opportunities to do what you have suggested and Edith has suggested, and that is find some other homes. You know, just recently we were given the responsibility, AHAB was given the responsibility for making recommendations for our home funds. And there are other federal dollars that are going to be coming our way, directly or indirectly, that maybe we can influence. I would like to see us make some of those kinds of recommendations for alternative funding sources for some of these projects that we think are worthy. And I fully appreciate that what we're doing 18 months or 24 months from now might look different than the priorities we've been confronted with the last 12 months.
Mr. Chair, let me just add one thing. Independence Inc. That is a worthy organization, and the funding that they used to have, they no longer had access to because of some federal changes, which means that every year they're going to have to come to us unless there is some other process for funding. That's just not appropriate. I mean, there's got to be another solution. That's an important population. And unless the city or someone else steps up, there's just got to be another solution. And that needs to be owned by something greater than just AHAB.
Thank you, Edith. Are there other thoughts from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, a final.
Hold on, Ron. Paul, I think was gonna.
I'm sorry.
Maybe let Paul.
Sure, yeah, Paul Nuzum, Lawrence Home Builders. I don't know that I fully understood the complete proposal from Ron, but to Thomas's point about things have the potential to go south where we couldn't provide that funding down the road. I guess my follow-up on that would be there's potential in that same boat where that Libertad project, they still have a basket full of funds that they've yet to gather. And if our situation deteriorated where we couldn't live up to their funds, it's a potential that they wouldn't be able to secure whatever additional funds they needed on their end. So I don't know how that changes that point, but I think it's, if something were to affect us that negatively, it would probably also affect their other funding measures in that project too. So that might be something to consider when we're talking about the potential to put our money in play now and have a commitment down the road to them. That's just another factor to bring up.
Ron, did you want to comment now?
Thank you. Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative. My comment is exactly what Edith said, only worded a little bit different way. And that is, the community needs a housing policy. And I've said this before, we've developed an affordable housing policy, but we're kind of a silo over here. And as we've had dollars available, people that have been unable to fulfill their funding needs from other sources have come to us because suddenly we're a new resource. But we're not part, we might be a component part of a housing policy, but we don't represent the entirety of a housing policy. We're probably not going to fund, for example, financial literacy programs. Although they've come to us a year ago and asked, a year and a half ago and asked, we said no. But they're like, people, they can't keep their housing because they have no financial literacy. We're a component part. Makes all kinds of sense. But I think we're largely in agreement. We're not a great home for that kind of funding source. We need a comprehensive housing policy, of which the affordable housing component is maybe the largest component. But if we had a broader strategy, we could better align all of the other silos of revenue with what we're trying to do.
This is Monte, Soukup chair. That's a good comment, Ron, as well as Paul. I see that Nicholas Ward with Tenants to Homeowners is on the call. I wonder if we might ask him to clarify exactly when the Tenants to Homeowners project would, one, need a commitment, and two, would need funds, just so we all have those facts in front of us. So I'm going to call on Nicholas Ward to comment on that. Nicholas?
Thank you, Nicholas. Nicholas Ward here with Tenants to Homeowners. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Ron Gacious was able to hit it right on the head. It's going to be May 7th when we would need to see the allocation or dedication or commitment of funding. However, legally it would need to be worded if funding ended up going the route where it was to be dedicated to actually be allocated at a later date. We need to show that, and this is something I think actually it's going to come up for AHAB repeatedly, because the state has shifted its LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit funding, to where now this is just going to be the regular. Previously, I think you were able to submit this kind of application and then go ahead and get a commitment from the municipality at a follow-up date for a different part of the application, but now it has to be done kind of ahead of time. And so you'll probably be seeing this next year, the year after, and then again and again. And so that's something to address somehow with the timeline of when the funding is made available. To speak to what some of you have brought up, Tenants to Homeowners recognizes the need for everybody else to receive funding from this pot. We also understand that we're not going to need tangible access to those funds until end of the year. So if it's possible, and if there was a way to do it, we're in support of the idea that we wouldn't be pulling from available funding from others for something that we're going to need later on in the year when other funds are available. I know that's outside of process and it's sticky, but it's the timeline that we're put into with this structure of the LIHTC at the state level.
Thank you, Nicholas. I have one follow-up question, and that is, you need the commitment in order to make the LIHTC submittal, or it strengthens your LIHTC submittal? Tell me what that is.
The way that I understand it is that there absolutely has to be, the funding is a part of the project funding stream, of course, but it's really showing, I think, that 5% is dedicated by the host municipality where the project would be occurring. And at the state level, federal level, they need to see that there's that kind of funding commitment, but also just a commitment and agreement with the project scope.
Okay. Thank you, Nicholas. Appreciate the input. Okay. So I think I'm gonna, unless we have someone that wants to comment desperately, I think I'm gonna circle us back to trying to figure out what our recommendation would look like, because our ultimate goal today is to make a recommendation to the city council. Maybe I'll try to start us off, unless someone else wants to do this. I will try to summarize what I think a recommendation is starting to look like. This is not a proposed recommendation, just a place to start us. I think we're all in agreement that we want to in some way fund the Libertad project and commit funding to the Libertad project. Are we in basic agreement on that? Okay. I'm seeing a bunch of nods. Not a vote, just a nods. So then the question is the other projects that are worthy of funding, that we feel are worthy of funding. We have, I think there are two options on the table that we've discussed. One would be simply forwarding a recommendation to the council that recommends Libertad to use 100% of our funding, and saying these other projects have merit and should be funded out of some other kind of source. And we should ask the county, we should ask the city, we should ask the state even, maybe, I don't know. We ought to try to, broaden that ask, certainly, to at least include the county. The other option is to forward Libertad as a recommendation and ask the city, and I don't know if that's an ask of the staff or the council, to determine if they don't need a commitment until May and don't need the funds until, let's say, December of 2021, what funds would the city be comfortable committing to other projects because of the way the revenue stream comes in and when the money's needed? Would they be, would we be able to generate a number that we could commit to other projects, and then this body could recommend project number 2, project number 3, whatever, however far down the line we can go. So I think those are the two avenues that, at least from the discussion, I see. Any thoughts on those two methods? And it could be a combination, We could say we're going to fund Libertad and we want an additional, we'd like to see additional $100,000 funded this year for these other projects, for maybe, a couple other projects. And we'd like the city to find permanent funding. My personal concern is that doesn't make near as strong a statement about our desire for them to find other funding sources, but that's for this body to decide, not me. Yeah, Paul.
Paul Nuzum, Lawrence Home Builders. I would support something that could potentially commit us to Libertad, but allow us to put our dollars in play right now. There's a lot of stuff that we could fund currently, and I think there's valid points of concern of how that affects or how that could play out, but it seems like a good scenario where we could put our dollars in play now and still support Libertad.
And Mr. Chair, Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors, in my previous, not dissension per se, but dissension, I did not in any way want to say that I do not support funding Libertad, doing as much as we can. That is obviously the best project. And if there is a way to defer it without negatively impacting, what future potential we've got, I would be in support of that.
Monte, Soukup, Chair. Sorry, Edith, go ahead, Edith.
No, you go ahead, Monte.
Okay, so, and I would say I'm not against trying to fund some of these other projects either. I think the thing we need to, that I would be cautious about is taking from the amount of money we have in our next NOFA and that next project that comes up that needs that money, and then we don't have the money. I mean, we've kind of got this cycle of doing that once a year. And if we pre-use those funds, we certainly, which is what happened to us this year. We pre-used the funds and we only have $450,000. In a normal year, we would have close to $1 million. So we've caused our own situation here in a sense. And I don't, do you want to propagate that to next year? Or do you want, maybe propagate a little bit, but not have, not commit quite as much to the next year, so that's all my comment. Go ahead, Edith.
Yeah, I wondered about a compromise. I know compromise isn't very popular in our country these days, but we might, start something different. Like splitting the difference, that we commit $225,000 now and plan for $225,000 for November, that we commit to that, so that we say we're funding it totally, but out of this pocket, out of this portion, only half of it. That leaves some funding for other projects this time as well. And it will also presumably leave some funding for November for other projects.
Yep, thank you, Edith. Ron, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative. I don't think we're permitted to make a commitment of funds that we haven't yet gathered. That's why I was originally proposing that the commitment letter that the City Commission prepare for the Libertad project be a commitment of the city's general obligation revenues rather than AHAB revenues, because we're not permitted to commit revenues we haven't yet gathered, okay? But the city has the dollars in the bank that they could commit against. And then when November rolls around, they could write the check out of their own funds, the general obligation funds, or if they chose to, they could write the check out of the AHAB funds. Now, that raises the concern for folks that were, I think the phrase was pre-use or pre-allocating funds. Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. But we're not allowed to pre-allocate AHAB funds that haven't yet been collected. So I'm trying to get around that by having an authorization from the city to fund Libertad out of their own revenues. And then if they continue to write that check out of their own revenues, then we'll have the full 10 months of dollars that we can allocate in our next NOFA. Now, reference was made to last year being an example of pre-using our dollars and lamenting the fact that we only have $450,000 or whatever the number is to allocate now. Well, yeah, I wish we had more too. But last year we didn't pre-allocate the dollars. We did a good thing. We had dollars in our hands. The community needed those dollars. We got them to work sooner. We responded more quickly. The ability to adapt and do that, I view as a benefit, as a positive, rather than as a detriment, a disadvantage. I mean, we're going to make an allocation right now. We're not scheduled to make another allocation to the end of the year. By the end of the year, we're going to have almost $1 million, maybe more, sitting in the bank. Some of it could have been put to work.
Ron, this is Monte, Soukup Chair. Ron, maybe I portrayed that poorly. I did not at all mean that we did something wrong. I agree with you 100%. We got the dollars put to work, but it did create a situation where we have less funding this year to allocate. That's all I was saying. I was not at all. I mean, I voted for that just like everybody else probably. So we did the right, I'm not questioning that we made a wrong decision at all. Just that it created a situation here today. So, all right, and maybe just thinking about putting a different lens on your thought there, Ron, what if the dollars for the other projects were not allocated until later? The other projects were funded at a general fund, and we stick to the number one project for the other for the trust funds, and then when dollars are available, those other projects could be committed at that point, because it wouldn't take very many months to get $50,000, $100,000 in funds into the account, and we'd be talking about probably March or something being able to actually fund some of those other projects. Would you be open to that kind of idea?
Ron Gaseous, Chamber Representative. Absolutely. I'm in favor of whichever mechanism works. And I'm in favor of whichever mechanism the consensus of the advisory board supports. I felt an obligation to present a proposal and never suggested that it answered all of the questions or issues that it creates. It was simply one way. I'm completely comfortable. If the motion were to fund the Libertad proposal out of funds we have available right now, I'll second that motion, and then I'll come back in behind that, and we can make other recommendations to the city about other things that we think ought to be funded from other sources, or come back to it in 6 months and try to fund some of them in the middle of the year, whatever folks want to do. I just think that this adaptive, having a flexible response to the situation in front of us is a good thing.
Diane, this is Monte Soukup, Chair. Diane, question. I am kind of thinking that maybe we should make 2 recommendations to the city council. One to be to fund Libertad, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name. And just leave it at that. That's a pretty clean thing. And then maybe come back with a second recommendation for a way to handle, potentially fund, or ask them to fund, whatever that recommendation would be on the other projects, just so they're we're not giving them something that they like part of and don't like another part of, and then can't act on it. What do you think of that?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. Mr. Chair, I think that you could certainly do that. It's in the purview of the board to make the recommendations, and then ultimately the City Commission to make the final decision related to the AHAB funds, and also, you know, any general city funds. I think so you could either have that all in one motion, or you could make separate motions. And in any case, I think it's all part of the recommendation. And in your motion, you could be, you could have some comments towards some of your concerns that you had expressed, and the timing of the need for the tenants to homeowners project, and the need to get the funds out the door. So I think that you have a lot of leeway here in your action today with regard to how you pass this recommendation along. I think including along the lines of what Edith Guffey had talked about, doing some split with funds, and requesting that some funds, future funds, be committed. That could be a possibility given the timing of the need of the funds to homeowners. Again, your purview really is recommending with regard to the affordable housing trust funds. However, you could suggest other funding be considered by the City Commission if that's something that you think that should be considered.
Okay.
So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Diane. Thomas, you gotta raise your hand there.
Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors. Mr. Chair, I think that this conversation is bringing up a very substantial issue that the Affordable Housing Advisory Board has to deal with. And that issue is our problem in this community, and not just in this community, in Kansas City, in Topeka, in almost every city in the country, and maybe every city in the country, is that affordable housing is not feasible. We need to do something more substantial than we've been doing. And if we can go to our city commission and impress upon them the fact that the paltry number of dollars which we are able to throw at this problem is not sufficient. We need to figure out how to work more effectively on this issue of affordable housing. And it is not just us, it is literally a nationwide issue. Every single community that I know of has to deal with funding affordable housing in whatever way that happens to be, whether it is convincing landlords that they can put their properties back into into the open market, whether it is figuring out ways to subsidize builders creating more affordable housing. I am fully in support of doing everything we can with our limited resources that we have been given to deal with, but at the same time making a recommendation that we try to move the needle, because I feel like what we're doing right now is a drop in the bucket and the needle's not really moving an awful lot. And in terms of that, I think that the Libertad project does in fact address more substantially than most. And so I would be in favor of allocating dollars just to them at this point, recognizing that it is, again, it's maybe a slightly bigger drop in a big bucket.
Thank you, Thomas. Did I sense a motion there that we should make a recommendation to fund the Libertad project?
I did not make a Mr. Chair, Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors. I did not make a specific motion. However, if there is no more discussion, I would be happy to create one, which would also probably include a suggestion or a motion to go to our city commission and say, we need to deal with this in a different way. That would be a separate motion, but I think that it's accurate that we need to put that together. If there is no further discussion, then I can certainly create a motion, but at this point I have not put one forward.
Okay. Yeah, Paul.
Paul Nuzum, Lawrence Home Builders. The only thing that has me just caught my attention or is on my radar is the fact that we have all these things on our plate now in front of us. I'm curious how the commission will take a recommendation to just find other funding for it and pay for it, or if we should say we have to deal with this now one way or another, and then give them a heads up that, hey, we've got consistent asks here that we need to get on your radar, and you guys need to start developing a response to it. That's my only concern, is how they're going to respond to just having that show up on their table with us telling them to hopefully dig up another funding source.
Money.
Yeah. Edith Guffey, member at large. I would, if no other option, I would support Thomas's recommendation. My first preference would be to do a split and do something now. If that's not possible, then I would support Thomas's recommendation. If there's some way to commit to Libertad and do something now to some of these other projects, that would be my preference. But if that's not workable, then 100% to Libertad.
Again, Tom, I'm sorry, Ron, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Thomas.
Edith, do you have a suggestion for what that might look like, for whatever that split might look like?
You know, the 225,000, if we could get around not being able to commit future dollars and all of that stuff, surely there's a workaround some way. And I would leave that to staff to figure that out. You know, I would give the $50,000 to Habitat. And then I'd look at because they were the second highest. And then maybe Douglas County, weren't they the next highest?
Community shelter.
Community shelter was number 2.
Community shelter. You know, community shelter, yeah, I would give it to, they actually go to the same population, quite frankly. So I would give it to Douglas County Housing Authority. 50,000. So
The
then,
New Horizons. You're talking about New Horizons.
yeah, the New Horizons. And then we're up to 350, right? And then I'm torn.
I have a question for Diane Stoddard. Ron Gaseous, Chamber Representative. I have a question
ahead,
for
Ron.
Diane Stoddard. Diane, if it's okay to split the commitment to Libertad, $225,000 now and $225,000 later, why can't we make all of the commitment to Libertad later? I was of the impression we couldn't make commitments on funds we didn't have in hand. And so I don't understand when you say, well, you could do a split commitment and you could do some of the money for Libertad now and some of the money later. They need a commitment of funds in their package for May 7th. And we're not permitted to make a commitment. I don't think the city is permitted to make a commitment of funds they haven't yet gathered. So how do we make a split commitment? And if we can make a split commitment, well, then why don't we just make a full commitment for Libertad, but it'll come out of the end of the year funds and not out of the dollars that we've got now?
Yeah, Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think the commitment would need to be subject to the revenues coming in if it were the rest of the dollars, you know, this year. But
what's that mean? Subject to the revenues coming in? I thought the rule was you can't commit dollars you don't have in hand.
well, and that may be exactly what tenants to homeowners needs to put in their application, that they have a firm commitment. And it could be that that by the time that the date of May 7th rolls around, that there would be enough cash in the fund to be able to make that firm commitment. I think it's depending on how it is that you structure it. So yes, you don't want to make a commitment that you cannot fund. You could either do that, you could do it conditionally, I suppose, knowing that you are anticipating additional revenues here this year that are yet to come in. And again, that'll be along with any other funding recommendations that you pass on to the commission. I think, again, the commission's got to take all of this into account, you know, in what it ultimately decides to do with all of the other needs that are presented to the city at this time, and what would be committed to. And there may be some other staff have some other comments on this as well.
And Ron, for me, the split is to leave dollars in November for other organizations.
Yeah.
Monte, Soukup Chair, maybe follow up on Diane. Could we essentially ask the commission to commit the dollars, let's say when they become available. So in other words, if we said we wanted to commit to do New Horizons, when the dollars are there, you know, can they just delay the commitment of those dollars until they're available in this coming year? So if those dollars are available in June, then that's when they make the commitment. So they're there to meet our requirement. But I mean, I know we're still essentially forward committing, not funding. Is that a possible way to make the recommendation to allow them to do that? Because I'm thinking about the Libertad project where you don't want to put that the federal funding at risk by committing half. That's what I'm afraid of. I think you want to, that's such a good project. We want to commit to that and then, not, you know, commit to it knowing we won't have to spend it yet.
Yeah, I think on this one, the timing is a little bit challenging, and I understand that the board is trying to balance what you have as your top project versus projects that are needing funding right now. So in my mind, you could do a couple things. You could, and I think the other thing to keep in mind for the board is that, you know, each of these times we're publicly saying that we have a certain amount of funds available. And to the extent that you recommend more than the funding available, there is some signals that you're sending or perhaps aren't being clear with all applicants about what's possible there. So I think that's a consideration, but I say that carefully because I know that you all are balancing all the great projects and the ideas that are coming in and a desire to get these dollars in play as soon as possible. It seems like with the Libertad project, if you did want to move ahead with other projects and get the monies out the door, that could be a recommendation. And you could say that we would like to revisit the Libertad closer to their application date, and then look at the funds that are available that have come in by that date, which may affect the funds later in the year, of course. So that could be another way of looking at it. I think in general, if this board provides its best recommendation, you know, and pass it on, some of the technical issues may be able to be addressed by the commission. And I saw Danielle Bushcutter had come on camera there. Danielle, did you have some additional to add regarding timing and budget considerations there?
Danielle Bushcutter, Budget and Strategic Initiatives Administrator. I think, Diane, you summed it up really well. I think I don't have much else to add after those additional comments. But I would say, you know, the action here, I know we're kind of spanning multiple years here, is really the allocation of 2020 dollars. So I think that's the other thing to keep in mind. If you do make a recommendation in excess of that amount, it would really be for those 2021 program year, if you want to think about it kind of in that context. So, you know, I would note that $350,000 from the general fund that is identified, that had been identified in the CIP, typically comes over as a lump sum towards the beginning of the year. That was really the only other thing that I would add. And in all of these agreements that we have with agencies, we also have that cash basis language in there that does, Ron, to your point, acknowledge that the funds will go out the door if the city has them, but it does protect the city if those funds do not come in place. So that is language that we have in our agreements with agencies as well.
Danielle, it's Monte, Soukup Chair. Let me ask you a couple questions. If we committed the 450 to Libertad, when would we have an additional 200 to 300,000 in the coffers and be able, what I'm thinking is we do a 2021 allocation NOFA early in the year. And maybe it's abbreviated, and we award, we get basically these same projects back, but go through our 2021 award process for early award to get some of these projects funded. So when would we have money in the bank to be able to award $200,000-$300,000 worth of projects based on your projections, income projections?
This is Danielle Bushcutter, Budget and Strategic Initiatives Administrator. So we do typically, as I mentioned, have that transfer, that general fund transfer of $350,000. Typically that happens in January. I don't think that the actual transfer has actually happened yet, but typically that does happen at the very beginning of the year. On the sales tax side, it's a lot harder to kind of project those. A lot of our projections there, that is a volatile revenue source compared to others that we have. I think the average that we received over the course of 2020 on, if you take the average, it was about $75,000 on average a month. I will also note, however, though, that sales tax is cyclical. So February is typically a higher month because those who file their sales tax on an annual basis for the previous year, we received those dollars as the city in February. So there is some, that is a cyclical process. So we would have those general fund dollars really early here in 2021. Sales tax, that's a little bit more cyclical, but if you look at 2020 on average, it was about $75,000 a month on average.
Yeah,
Question for Danielle. Danielle, is it correct that the amount of money we identified as being available in this NOFA is the amount of money that we actually had on hand when we sent out the NOFA announcement? And since that time, we've banked both the November and the December sales tax contributions that have been, as you said, approximately $75,000. So we've got unencumbered in our account a couple of months of sales tax revenue, roughly $150,000, and sometimes in January, an additional $350,000 will be deposited into the trust fund. And then by the end of January, we have an unencumbered balance of about $500,000. We could come right back in February and take up the distribution of $200,000 or $300,000 of additional trust fund dollars from the very projects that we've got in front of us. I don't think we're obligated at all, are we, Diane, to actually have another NOFA if we decide to turn around and just make another recommendation to the City Commission for spending out of the trust fund? Can't we continue to consider the projects that are in front of us next month?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think that I think if the board wanted to do that, you could put in your recommendation that it's because of the quality of the applications that you received, and that is your recommendation as the best use of the funds. The only thing I'm cautioning the board about is that when we have a NOFA and we advertise it for $450,000, and then recommend beyond that, you wonder, would there have been other projects that may have applied for more money had they known that would be an option? And obviously when you're setting that and versus the time that you're at this stage of the process, you've got several months behind you, and it's a little bit difficult to predict. So I think that the board's interest in getting projects on the ground is compelling here, and to the extent that you feel that way and want to put that in your motion to the commission regarding the funding of this, I think that would be appropriate.
This Monte Soukup chair, I think we could, I mean, if it's the pleasure of this board, I think we could word a motion that would allow us, I guess, make a recommendation to fund the large project and also make a statement that there are other great projects in this, and that if we would ask that the city commission, you know, find other revenue sources to fund some of these other projects, or to consider making a 2021 allocation to fund some of the projects, and kind of leave the funding mechanism to them, but maybe put a cap on it and say, because we're concerned about robbing next year's allocation, you know, November allocation, we would like the cap, if something's taken out of the trust fund, we put a cap or recommended cap on the amount that could be taken, so that, you know, let's say we were going to end up with $1 million in November of next year, we would only end up with 800,000. You know, don't let it so much be awarded that we end up back at 500,000 again and we're struggling. You think we could word it that way? Would that would that just upset the commission? We threw that back on their plate to figure out how to fund that, or
Mr. Chairman,
Ron, go ahead.
Ron Gaseous, Chamber Representative. I like that approach, but I think we should be, I think we should just be more specific in saying, these are the 2 or 3 or whatever the number is we agree on, projects that we would like funded out of the trust fund when the dollars are available. And that way we've created our own cap by making specific recommendations of what we want them to consider, rather than just asking them to determine which of them that we want. And then a final comment, that what you just described had 2 or 3 component parts to it. I'd like to recommend that we start to break it into component parts. I think there's a consensus that's starting to develop here with some different pieces to it. If the first piece is, I asked the members of the board, if the first piece is we want to go ahead and make the recommendation to fund the Libertad commitment out of the dollars we have in the current NOFA, then I'll make that recommendation if it's time for that first component part. If we want to have more discussion about the broader concepts, then I'll hold that back.
Is there any discussion on that, Ron's question?
Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors. I would say 15 minutes ago, my position was, if there is no further discussion, well, we've had quite a bit of further discussion. So I would suggest that Ron, you make that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend $450,000 be allocated out of the current funding availability in support of the Libertad project.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors. I would second that motion.
Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call a roll. So I'm going to try to do a better job this time. Ron Gaseous?
Ron Gaseous, Chamber Representative, aye.
Thomas Howe?
Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Representatives. Aye as well. Lawrence Board of Realtors representative, sorry.
Edith Guffey?
Member at large, aye.
Paul Nuzum?
Aye.
Sarah Waters?
Aye.
Those are the members attending. I, as chair, Monte Soukup, vote aye as well. So I think that motion carries. So now we need to address what we want to, a second motion based on my understanding of how we want to address the other projects. And I think it might be good to start with maybe ranking those projects we're picking. I think Edith suggested a rank earlier that included the Lawrence Habitat for Humanity project, critical home repair and workforce housing. It also included the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority New Horizon project. I think those were the two, correct me if I'm wrong, Edith. So that would be $100,000 worth of additional funding projects that we might recommend.
This is Edith Guffey.
Mhm.
I would add with some admittedly misgivings, Independence Inc. And I add them because they were not ranked high, but I add them because there's no one else addressing that population.
Thank you, Edith. Paul? Oh. Paul, did you have a comment? Oh.
I was just muting myself.
Oh, so I saw your hand come up.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Ron, sorry.
this is, Ron Gaseous, Chamber Representative. I support Edith's recommendation to include Independence Inc. for the very same reason that she mentioned. This is a very high need population, and there just aren't very many people working in this space. And even though it scores low, the benefit for the small numbers that do receive the services, the improvements, I think are just life-changing.
Thank you, Ron. I certainly, Monte Soukup Chair, I certainly understand that and empathize with that request and feel the same. I mean, they have been here, I think, 3 times, and it has not been funded because we've had great projects. So certainly, and it's a fairly small ask. I would also advocate for something, not the full $291,000, but for the United Way Douglas County project. And my reasoning for that is I see that project, one, it helps 140 units, whatever we're calling that, families, individuals. It touches a lot of people, and it goes upstream of the problem and tries to address housing before people lose their houses and struggle to have income. It keeps people in their houses. And I think if you, based on the research, and I'm going to speak as a Justice Matters person at this point, when you look at communities that we've done research on, the communities that start addressing this problem are the communities that keep people housed where they are, and they don't lose their affordable housing that already exists. That's the #1 step. It's going upstream and keeping the babies from coming down the river. So I support that, maybe to the tune of $50,000 or something. I'm just throwing out a number, and that gives us an even $200,000 that we're asking the commission, 4 projects that would at least get that a start on that.
Mr. Chair, Sarah Waters from the University of Kansas. I agree with what you're saying. I thought it might be worth pointing out that these projects that we've just discussed, I believe mostly their score is lower because the leverage ratio that is set because they need so much funding is at a 1, and it bumps their score significantly lower because they have such great need. And so I think that gets to what Edith was speaking to earlier of these are different organizations. They're doing incredible work, and they need a lot of support, and there aren't a lot of buckets, or there are no dedicated buckets of money to help fund this work, which is why I think we are talking about trying to help fund them and give them that avenue to help our community. So I just wanted to point that out, because that leverage ratio, I know when I was filling out my matrix, it threw me for a loop each time, because again, it was already that area was completed, and then I would see where the score was, and I'd be like, oh, this is such a great organization. But I was stuck because of how the math works.
Yeah, Paul. Thank you, Sarah. Paul.
Paul Nuzum, Lawrence Home Builders. Can, just for my own clarification, can we summarize which, I know you just mentioned 50 for United Way. What other projects do we have on the table that we're considering? And are we discussing a recommendation for the commission to find other funding? Are we discussing a recommendation for future funds to be dedicated to these projects?
Paul, I'll take a stab at that. I think we have Independence Inc., 50,000. New Horizons, Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority at 50,000. Lawrence Habitat for Humanity Critical Home Repair at 50,000. And then I had suggested United Way Douglas County at some level to be determined by this group. And then the second part of your question, I would say that we are going to make a recommendation to the city commission that we think these are highly worthy projects that need to be funded, that we would ask them specifically to try to find other funding sources, because these are most of these are ongoing programs that need permanent funding. But that maybe as a bridge, they could be funded out of the trust fund this year when the funds are available, if and when they become available out of 21 funds. But again, I want to make a strong statement, or I'd like to see us make a strong statement that other funding sources are needed for some of these ongoing operational costs for these programs that are super worthy of the community dollars.
Mr. Chair, Paul Nuzum, Lawrence Home Builders. I really liked the Lawrence Community Shelter too. If we're putting in a general ask for them to help find funds, I would hope that we could include that one. So rapid rehousing. I don't think that was on your list that you mentioned initially.
Thank you, Paul. That was not on my list. I would entertain discussion on adding that.
This is Sarah Waters, University of Kansas. I do think we should add them. I mean, they were the second highest score on the average for everyone. But I know Edith had made a comment earlier that the community shelter in the New Horizons seem to be serving similar to same populations potentially, Edith. I don't know if you want to further clarify or have different thoughts on that.
They do go to all of the vouchers for Douglas County Housing Authority go to residents of the shelter. It's just that right now the proposal for Lawrence Community Shelter is for rapid rehousing, but they are all for residents of the shelter. It's just that right now this proposal for the shelter is for persons who are actually right now housed in hotels. So they are all for the homeless population. That someone from staff, is that an accurate summary? I called to get some clarification on that earlier myself. Brad, help me out here, Brad.
This is Brad Carr, Community Development Analyst, and Yes, the New Horizons program is specifically for residents that are, and I believe it in the original application that they were funded, it was for families that were residing in the shelter. I'd have to check to see if this application specifically is talking about families. And then yes, the community shelters application are for residents that have been currently housed in hotels, whether for just cold weather reasons, social distancing reasons at the shelter, or if they have some possible quarantine issues. And so, yes, they're serving the same population. They're just coming out in different situations. The Housing Authority money is for, I think it's for families that are residing currently at the shelter. And the shelter's application is for homeless individuals currently residing in the city's motel program, that when the funding for that source ends, those individuals are going to need to be housed somewhere.
Monte, you're on mute.
Go ahead, Ron. Thanks.
Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative. Question for Brad. Brad, the New Horizons program and the Lawrence Community Shelter program you just described, are either of these the program that the City Commission or the County Commission just recently added funds for?
This is Brad Carr, Community Development Analyst. I believe in the New Horizons application, they had indicated that the county has awarded $100,000 for that program for the upcoming year. I don't know if maybe Danny or Diane or Danielle would about this, with anything that the City Commission has committed towards either of these organizations.
This is Dani Walters with PDS. To my knowledge, the City Commission has not awarded any money specifically for rapid rehousing. The City Commission did just authorize some more money for winter hotel shelter, but this application is more, as Brad mentioned, taking the folks that are in this program, and also I believe this does move over to the ESG program as well, and tries to move them out of the hotel rooms and into more permanent housing situations.
Thank you.
Diane, go ahead.
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. Mr. Chair, as it appears that the board is perhaps working its way to another motion on this topic, as you make that, I would encourage you, if for some reason your recommendation makes it such that the recommended project is out of order with the average project score on the overall scoring sheet, that you just make it clear in the motion the reasons why the board is recommending that project over another. And that clarity, I think, will help the City Commission as it discusses your recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Diane. All right. I'm feeling like we're close to putting a motion on the floor. I don't know that we gained any consensus around the community shelter question as to whether we want to add it or not. I can outlast you guys. I'm just telling you.
This is Sarah Waters, University of Kansas. I think we should add it partly because of our scoring and because of the critical need in our community right now, whether that's cold weather or COVID related or just a general need. And so I would add that into the list because it is helping a slightly different population likely than the New Horizons request. So that would take us up, if it was at 50,000, I think that would bump us to 250.
250, right.
Of this money that we want to materialize or be dedicated.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Ron?
Mr. Chairman, Chamber of Commerce Representative, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the City Commission that we distribute from the Housing Trust Fund at the beginning of February, $50,000 to the Lawrence Habitat for Humanity for their critical home repair and workforce housing project. $50,000 to Independence Inc. for their accessible housing program. $50,000 to Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority for the New Horizons program. $50,000 to the Lawrence Community Shelter for their Exiting Winter Shelter to Housing Assistance Program. And which one have I missed? I've missed the United Way program. Which one? Where is that? And $50,000 to United Way Douglas County for the Housing Stabilization Collaborative, with instructions to the City Commission that these dollars be distributed in early February when they're available from the trust fund, but that the commissioners please look for other resources to fund these types of requests, some additional resources beyond the trust fund to fund these types of requests in the future.
Thank you, Ron. Thomas?
And so I don't have the matrix up in front of me. Does that address the issue that Diane had brought up about us being out of sequence with our scoring matrix?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to modify my amendment, my recommendation to add a comment about funding of the critical home repair. I'm sorry, that's not the one. The accessible housing program by Independence Inc. to note the lack of other available funds for this program and the very high benefit that would be received by a subset of those with housing needs that are very significant in our community.
Thank you, Ron.
This is Sarah Waters, University of Kansas. To Thomas's question, it does not. We were out of sync there based on the recommendations or the that were put forward. Tenants to Homeowners new program, their ARM, according to what I've got, was 5th on our rubric. So we were not allocating any funds to them at this point. I do think that could be justifiable. However, I believe that is a brand new program that they were looking to start. And so while it scored well in the average of the rankings, I think we just are recommending instead to, although the community shelter is a new program too, but to take existing programs and existing need that is already and maybe there to fund those. So I don't know if I made a lot of sense there, but we do need to make a notation based on Diane's request about, I think, that Tenants to Homeowners other project. So if somebody else can say that better than I did, please feel free.
This is Edith Guffey. I think we note in our documents that the scoring alone would not be the determining factor of the recommendations.
Agreed, Edith. This is Sarah Waters again. I think the commission has questioned that a couple times, which is why we have to put that asterisk behind it. So.
Thank you, Sarah. Diane, I think I saw you chime in there.
Yeah, Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think this conversation is very helpful, and of course the commission will have access to the tape of this meeting, you know, to be able to review that. But I think that the wording in the motion that Mr. Gage has made also indicates, you know, that you're trying to prioritize along those lines that he articulated.
Okay, so I guess, Diane, a question is, do you think Ron's amendment motion and a proposed amendment to his motion, which actually, since it hasn't been seconded, is just his motion, is sufficient to do what we need to accomplish with the commission?
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think so. Again, with the targeted population that he had mentioned in his motion, but then also in concert with the rest of the discussion of the board, that we can relay that. I just know that the commission often has questions about that. And so to be very clear when the recommendation doesn't quite line up with the scoring is a good practice.
Okay, thank you, Diane. This is Monte, Soukup Chair. I want to make a comment on that. I believe Sarah pointed this out earlier. The reason really that a lot of the reason Independence Inc. scored lower was because of the matching funds. And the matching funds are zero. And that's what really drug that project down in a lot of cases. I'm happy to look at my own score, and I ranked at 5s across the board as far as alignment with our goals, and a 1 on matching funds. So it's not that the project did not meet our goals, it's that the funding match isn't there, which is just one factor. So as long as the board, the commission understands that, I think we're good. Okay. So do we have a second to Ron's motion?
Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors. I would second that motion.
Okay. Is there further discussion having a motion on the floor and seconded? I would like to make one comment, and I would just like to amend the motion slightly in that we strongly recommend that the commission find other or seek out other funding sources, permanent funding sources. The recommendation that they do that, I would like to strongly recommend that they do that.
Mr. Chairman, Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative, the maker of the original motion agrees with the recommended amendment.
Thank you. I'm a little need to re-second and approve that.
If so, the original seconder would go along with that.
Okay, so we have an amended motion approved and seconded. We have it seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right. All right. If not, I am going to call for this motion that's on the floor. Please respond aye or yes. Ron Gacious.
Aye.
Thomas Howe.
Aye.
Edith Guffey.
Aye.
Paul Nuzum.
Aye.
Sarah Waters.
Aye.
Monte Soukup. Aye. I believe the motion passes. And I believe that takes care of our business on item number 4. Is there any other business?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this isn't other business, it's just a comment. And, I realize what we've done, and we've done exactly what we feel that we need to do. I just want the commission to really take seriously this concern about the need to find other funds. And I wonder if it's going to take us refusing to fund some of these organizations, period, and drawing a line in the sand. I hope not, because the needs are very, very real. And I hope they hear that and find a way to respond. Because what we've done is we've done it anyway, even though we hear each other, we know how real the needs are. I'm sure they do too. But we keep using the AHAB funds because we know the needs are so real. And I wonder if that lets the commission off the hook. So I just want to go on record by saying that.
Thank you, Edith. I am seeing head nodding from almost every board member, if not every board member, as you make your comment. So duly noted, and I share that view as well. Okay, seeing no other new business. There are some calendar things on the